Hello, my name is Adrian Goldberg and welcome to the Byline Times podcast. The Byline Times is what the papers don't say, what radio doesn't report and what telly doesn't tell you. This time, kids care home Kerching. The company's profiting from looking after vulnerable children. Amalfi Midco, the parent company of the UK's largest children's care home provider, Kerching, has published its annual accounts showing that it charged local councils £575 million. But spent £136 million of that on what it describes as financial expenses. This means that more than £1 in every 5 provided by local authorities for looked after youngsters goes to servicing debts and meeting other financial charges. Martin Barrow is a journalist specialising in the care system. Carolyne Willow is founder director of Article 39, which fights for children's rights in institutional settings. And she's been involved in children's social work for 40 years. Welcome both. Martin, firstly, tell me a little bit about Amalfi Midco and this company that it owns called Kerching.
Kerching is probably the biggest provider of children's social care. So I'm talking about children's homes, foster care, residential special schools, and other services related to that very broad area of social care. The company was founded by two brothers, Farouk and Harun Sheikh. They built it up into a very substantial business. It was quoted on the stock market until last year when they decided to take it private. I think they felt that the stock market valuation was very low and it didn't really give the value they felt their company deserved. So they've been backed by a group of investors, mostly private equity. They raised a lot of money and took the company off the stock market in a deal that was worth around £1.1 billion. So that is how much a company that provides children's homes and foster care, as well as providing some services to young adults, is actually now worth. It's a big, big business.
And we're not suggesting, let's be absolutely clear about this right from the start, that there is any wrongdoing, that there is any illegality, that there is anything improper about this arrangement. They are simply operating within the confines that have been set by government for the provision of care for children.
Absolutely. The system is set up to embrace private enterprise. I mean, the children's social care relies very heavily now on companies to provide the services. We often criticize local authorities for the quality of social care for children, but we must not ignore the fact that the vast majority of social care, or a very large part of it, is actually provided by companies and not by the local authorities. Much of it has been outsourced. So about 90% of children's homes are now privately owned in England, and increasingly so is foster care. It's currently around 40% and rising. And much of the mental health care provided to children and young people is provided by private companies. And so are residential special schools. Increasingly, they're run by private companies for a profit.
And according to the latest annual accounts, the finance expenses for the year amount to £136 million. This includes bank loans and overdrafts, interest payable to fellow group undertakings, finance charges in respect of leases, what are called derivative financial instruments, interest on deferred consideration, all adding up, as I say, to £136 million. And your argument is that this is money which is going out of the system. Some of it is going to repay the venture capitalists who have lent money to the company, but this is money which otherwise might, if it was run by the local authority, stay within the system and be used to help care for those who need the care.
The actual debt the company has is almost £800 million. It sets at varying rates of interest, some as high as 13-14%. So this is debt that the company has agreed to repay over a period of years, 5, 6, 7 years. Now, financial companies like to lend money on this scale to children's social care providers because they see it as a fail-safe way of earning an income, because Kerching's only clients are local authorities. even local authorities that get into financial difficulties will continue to buy children's homes and foster care capacity for children in their care. They're not suddenly going to go away. So the risk of default on this debt is actually very, very small.
Yeah, these are statutory duties imposed upon local government that they have no option but to provide care homes or to provide foster care. So the people who are providing these services know that local authorities, however hard pressed they are, will have to be providing this kind of service and increasingly outsourcing them to private companies. Carolyne, you've been involved since the 1980s in children's social care. And people who remember that era will know that sometimes local authority care homes had a pretty poor reputation. There are numerous books written by people, so-called misery memoirs, relating to their times in children's care homes. So we can't really be too sentimental about local authority care homes and the quality of the care they provided, can we?
Absolutely not. And I'm not looking backwards. And my charity is not looking backwards in criticising where we are right now in the children's care system. The Education Select Committee in Parliament recently took evidence from the Competition and Markets Authority and others. And one of the most chilling terminology used by the representative from the Competition and Markets Authority, in fact, was to describe local authorities as distress purchasers. And I sat there listening and thought, here we have thousands of children who rely on the state for their very fundamental needs to be met. These are highly traumatized children. They have been through more than enough already before they ever meet a social worker or a local authority representative. And here we have in Parliament a representative with very senior representatives from local authorities, from private providers, and from a charity describing local authorities making decisions for these highly vulnerable children in a state of chaos, no option. And how have we got here? We are the sixth wealthiest country in the world. Martin, earlier you referred to government embracing private profit making within the children's social care sector. I would say that it is facilitating. If we do not have a government ready to stand up and say this is wrong, and we need to be making sure that local authorities, who, as you said, Adrian, rightly have lots of legal duties and moral duties towards these children. If we do not have a government that is ready to stand up and say enough is enough, we need to sort this, then that's not just embracing. That is making a positive decision to allow children's care to continue in a state of chaos and uncertainty. And that's why my charity have issued at the end of 2022 a very detailed, comprehensive statement which says that profit making should be an absolute exception in the care of highly vulnerable children. And we need to move away from where we've got to.
Martin, Carolyne poses the question, how did we get to here? I'm guessing that, as with other industries, and only last week we heard about the failures of the privatised water industry, government was told that private companies could provide these services at a cheaper cost and more efficiently than local authorities. Is it as simple as that?
It is. Politically, that was the direction of travel. Central government and local authorities essentially sold off whatever they could, whether it was waste collection or the maintenance of roads, pretty much anything that could be outsourced was outsourced, whether it was sold directly or whether it was set up through a PFI scheme. There are many ways in which core services were given to private companies to operate. We have not differentiated between the care of vulnerable children and the collection of the rubbish from outside my house. We've treated it in exactly the same way. Get a private company to do it. Let's wash our hands of it.
And I mentioned earlier, we can't be misty-eyed about how local councils sometimes looked after children. Is there any evidence that for-profit children's homes or for-profit services for vulnerable children has led to any deterioration in the service provided?
So, Adrian, we are where we are. Everyone agrees that the care system is failing and that thousands of our most vulnerable children are being let down every day. The reality is that much of that care system is in private hands. It is privatized. So if we're going to reform the care system, we can't reform the care system without considering whether outsourcing it to private companies is the right thing to do. I, for one, think it's immoral that every time a child is taken into care, it represents an opportunity for a company to make a profit. I think that should be our starting point. One of the effects has been to make us send children and young people all over the country, hundreds of miles away from their families, because private companies choose to provide homes in the cheapest parts of the country, rather than where children want those homes to be. That's one of the effects of the privatization of the care system. If you're taken into care in West Sussex, the chances are that you will end up in a home in Lancashire. How is that even possible?
Yeah, I know that Stuart Pearce, who is the Director of Children's Services in Hampshire, said that he believes the profits of private companies providing these kind of services should be capped. Is that a way forward?
I, for one, think that it is very difficult to cap profits. What is a profit? Caretakers shareholders make money from the care of children in a variety of ways, through the interest they charge on the loans, which is very high, through administration fees, through financial fees, through interest on loan notes, through salaries. How do you cap that? How do you decide what you're going to cap? If you decide that the care of children is a business, then you have to live with the consequences of running it as a business. It's as simple as that.
Carolyne, in your experience, is there any qualitative difference between a privately run children's care home and a local authority run children's care home?
There is research from Oxford University which reviewed Ofsted inspection reports between 2014 and 2021 and found that private providers, businesses, were significantly more likely to have negative assessments by Ofsted. But I just want to take you back, Adrian, to your question about sometimes local authorities in the past didn't do right by children. That's an understatement, if I may say. I entered social work when local authorities and national government were starting to face up to the systemic abuse and neglect of children in care across the whole children's care system. And when I entered this world in the 1980s, we had no Ofsted. We had no regulation of children's homes. Those who managed children's homes could run them, and indeed often did, as fiefdoms. They were extremely punitive, brutal places often. And local authorities withdrew from, and the big children's charities withdrew in the face of those successive scandals and exposures, because they had to face up to the gigantic failure of child protection on their watch. At the same time, that was the period that Martin's referred to, when public services were being encouraged by national government to run themselves as businesses. And so local authorities have not run children's services, have not run children's homes under this new regulatory framework by and by. And again, it came up at the Education Committee hearing, and it often does. And it's always said without any, hold on a minute, what are you saying here? It was said the regulations are not fit for purpose, that they're burdens. But my assessment and involvement in children's social care tells me that the legal protections we have in place for children who live in children's homes have arisen precisely because of abuse and scandals in the past. So you can't compare it now with the past, because it was a free-for-all in the past. And local authorities coming back to the care of children, as they must, will have and be subject to lots of legal and professional obligations that in the past they just weren't. That was the reason for me to come into children's rights, because as a young social worker, I saw what was happening to children in children's homes. And they were, on the whole, hellholes. They could do anything and did do anything to children. We're not in that place now, although there are very, very strong pressures by the private providers and others to pull back those legal protections, because they describe them and present them as burdens.
Martin, this company, CareTech, is based in Jersey, which makes examination of some of its financial details rather difficult to follow. But we know that Three Hills Capital Partners, who are one of the groups involved in CareTech, £27,940,000 was paid to them in interest. The two brothers who you mentioned, Farouk Sheikh, OBE, and Haroon Sheikh, they received rents totaling £1.2 million from CareTech. So just generates cash, doesn't it? Generates cash.
Yeah.
So there's no suggestion of any impropriety or any wrongdoing, but that's all money that then goes away from the care of young people.
This is financial engineering. So the private equity firms, investment firms have chanced upon children's social care in the UK, and particularly in England, as a license to print money. It might as well be mashed potato or ice cream. It is just another way of making money. Can I just say that the recent trend towards investment by sovereign wealth funds from the Middle East, Abu Dhabi and Qatar are the two examples. Now, here's the thing. You're a very wealthy sovereign wealth fund based in the Middle East. You have the whole world to choose where you invest your money. You can choose any business, any sector, any company, and somehow you decide that the place where you want to be is children's homes in England. What more do you need to know about the amount of wealth that it is generating for investors who have no stake, no care really about what is actually happening to the children who they are ultimately responsible for?
Carolyne, where do we go from here?
Local authorities must get back into actually caring for children that they are legally and morally responsible for. It is a bit like the Wizard of Oz pulling back the screen. We present ourselves as a country that cares for children, and the government last year published a report that referred to world-class corporate parenting. But the reality is, a child coming into care today, they've got a 4 in 10 chance of being shipped out of their local authority, because the local authority doesn't have any places in their area for them, doesn't have a home for them. And if they are going into children's homes, or what's now called supported accommodation for children who are aged 16 and 17, they've got an 8 in 10 chance of being put in a business environment. So children coming into care, local authorities don't actually have homes. So if the care of children fundamentally is about children being looked after day to day, feeling loved, feeling listened to, feeling understood and heard and looked after, and all of their needs that they bring in with them being met together with their needs in the future, then local authorities need to be in the position to meet those needs, rather than, as the CMA representative described, being a distressed purchaser. We have to get to the point, and very, very quickly, of having a real children's care system, rather than pretending we have a children's care system. Because for as long as local authorities don't have homes for children, we don't have a care system.
Carolyne Willow from Article 39, and with her Martin Barrow, a journalist specialising in the care system. Now, in the interests of fairness, we did invite CareTech onto the programme, gave them the opportunity to be interviewed. They declined that, but did send us a statement in which they said CareTech provides a broad range of much-needed adults and children's services for people in society who have some of its most complex problems and challenges. They say that in many instances, these are services that local authorities are unable to provide. And they said that CareTech has provided such services for approaching 30 years and is justly proud of its extraordinary days every day for every one of the people in its care. They also said that to claim that 23% of the money paid by local authorities goes to servicing debts and paying fees is both factually incorrect and misleading. They say the financial expenses in the Amalfi Midco account comprise a plethora of items, not just interest relating to debt. It is far too simplistic and consequently inaccurate, they say, to take the finance expenses as disclosed in the accounts as a percentage of income. But I went back to them because I've looked at their accounts, and I said that my reading of the accounts shows that £136 million is described as interest expense on financial liabilities. And I asked them, what part of this is not debt or fees? I haven't yet heard anything back from them, but if I do, we'll post it on the landing page of the podcast. Thank you very much indeed for listening. Thanks to Martin, thanks to Carolyne, and thanks to CareTech for at least responding to us. I'm Adrian Goldberg. This has been the Byline Times podcast. If you want to support our work, please consider taking out a subscription to the Byline Times. It's a fantastic monthly newspaper. It has content that you can't read anywhere else. So do consider taking out a subscription. And in so doing, you'll be helping to support our work on the podcast as well. Head over to bylinetimes.com for more information. We'll see you again soon. Cheers now. Bye-bye. This has been a We Bring audio production for the Byline Times.